as well as the Pennines, and then the wet weather pushes into northwest England and West Wales by the end of the night. It turns more showery for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but with the wind picking up and the cloud increasing, most places are frost-free. The one exception, parts of East Anglia where temperatures will dip to around 0 first thing Saturday. Nevertheless, cloudy and increasingly breezy for the vast majority on Saturday itself. An area of persistent rain for southern Scotland, northwest England and much of Wales. Showers to the northwest of that, brighter skies to the south, and then widely wet and windy on Sunday.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into the things that have got you talking. Now, Boris Johnson has been in Brussels today warning us that Europe is in the midst of the worst security crisis for decades. Luckily for us, journalists were on hand to help us get to the bottom of this very serious situation.
How much further are you prepared to commit the UK on top of what's already happening? Would you, for example, in the case of an invasion, give UK military support to some kind of insurgency?
That was Laura Kunsberg there from the BBC. Boris Johnson on the stage there alongside one of the heads of NATO. That was a sensible question, you might think. But hang on a second, because there was a second part to it.
And if you're found to have broken the law, would you resign? And can I ask you to address this directly on behalf of people at home?
Goodness me, well, let's listen to how Boris Johnson responded to that.
First of all, I mean, on your point about what's going on at home, Laura, that process must be completed, and I'm looking forward to it being completed, and that's the time to say more on that.
Come on, he's a better man than me, Boris Johnson, because I would basically have told us to get lost. Can I say that? Or I can't say what I was going to say, but come on, how pathetic. You're talking about borderline World War III, and still he can't escape Partygate. Anyway, speaking of Boris Johnson, John Major, our former PM, has staged a passionate intervention today to talk about how important honesty and integrity is in our politicians. Yes, indeed, that'll be this, John Major. Anyway, also tonight I want to talk about fracking and the great news that in Scotland the ludicrous classroom maths policy looks finally likely to be dropped. However, before I get too excited, I've got to remember that maths were dropped in schools in England a while ago, and yet still many schools are still insisting that pupils wear them. What on earth is going on? We'll have that and more coming up. But first, the latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Just after 6, your top stories. The Prime Minister says Poland and the UK won't accept a world in which a powerful country can bully or attack its neighbour. It comes amid continuing fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Speaking after meeting with the Polish Prime Minister, Boris Johnson said Poland is critical to security in Eastern Europe, adding when Poland is threatened, we're all threatened. Mr. Johnson says Russia must understand the consequences if they were to invade Ukraine.
I think everybody should be in no doubt that were Russia to be so foolish to make the catastrophic mistake of invading any part of Ukraine, the Ukrainian army, which themselves number about 200,000, maybe 150,000 in reserve, they will fight. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies in Poland, which we always do, but also to show that the West as a whole will strengthen NATO's eastern frontiers rather than the reverse.
Boris Johnson speaking in Poland. Well, meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary has challenged her Russian counterpart, who claims the Kremlin isn't threatening any country despite its build-up of troops near Ukraine's border. Liz Truss said she can't see any other reason for having 100,000 troops stationed on the border. But the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, accused Britain of refusing to listen.
I'm here in Moscow today is that Russia has a very clear choice. They can pursue the path of diplomacy, work with NATO to improve European security, or continue down the path that they have been indicating by amassing troops on the border in a threatening way.
Liz Truss. The Prime Minister says he won't quit if he's fined by police over alleged lockdown-breaking events at Number 10. Former Prime Minister Sir John Major has accused Boris Johnson of breaking the law and making brazen excuses. Responding to the criticism, Boris Johnson says it was demonstrably untrue that controversies about parties in Downing Street had damaged the UK's reputation overseas. But Sir John Major said Mr Johnson's excuses were undermining public trust in the government.
Our democracy is a fragile structure. It is not an impenetrable fortress. It can fall if no one challenges what is wrong or does not fight for what is right. The protection of democracy depends upon Parliament and the government upholding the values we have as individuals and the trust we inspire as a nation.
Sir John Major. From the end of the month, pupils and teachers in secondary schools in Scotland will no longer need to wear face coverings in classrooms. Masks still will be required in some communal areas and when moving around school buildings. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, announced the change earlier in the Scottish Parliament.
In arriving at its recommendation, the advisory subgroup pointed to reducing case rates for secondary-aged pupils, which is a recent development, falling hospitalisation rates across all age categories, and the fact that at this stage the estimated R rate is now below 1. In addition, of course, vaccination rates for young people continue to increase.
Nicola Sturgeon. Pig farmers have been protesting outside a meeting that they say is critical for the future of their industry. A discussion is taking place at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA offices in York, over a crisis in British pig production. It comes after at least 35,000 healthy pigs had to be culled because of a shortage of butchers. The National Pig Association says more than 200,000 other pigs are being held on farms, even though they're ready for slaughter. Buckingham Palace says Her Majesty the Queen is not showing symptoms for COVID-19, despite meeting Prince Charles on Tuesday, who has since tested positive for the virus. The palace hasn't confirmed if Her Majesty has tested positive or negative, citing medical privacy. Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall attended an event at the British Museum yesterday. And the Duchess of Cornwall says she's very honoured and very touched to have been endorsed by Her Majesty as future Queen Consort. She spoke publicly about the announcement for the very first time while opening a community kitchen in West London today. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now more from Michelle and Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, we've got Mark Wallace, who's the Chief Executive of Conservative Home, Gareth Sturdy, who's a teacher and education consultant, and anthropologist Mary-Ann O'Hotter. Now, you know the drill on Dewbs & Co. It's not just about us, it's about you at home and your thoughts. You can get in touch with me with whatever is on your mind tonight, quite frankly, and all your thoughts on the topics that we'll get into. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says Europe faces the most dangerous moment in its biggest security crisis for decades as tensions grow between Russia and Ukraine. Speaking in Brussels, Boris said the stakes were very high.
I believe that if we can keep a strong grip on the fundamentals, those fundamental principles that define our alliance, and combine strong deterrence with patient diplomacy, then we can find a way through this crisis. But the stakes are very high, and this is a very dangerous moment.
Well, Russia denies it plans to invade, but has 100,000 troops on Ukraine's border. The PM then has travelled to Poland in support of NATO allies. Our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, brings us the latest in this report.
Training for urban warfare. These are some of the 300 British troops currently stationed in Poland. They are part of the UK's enhanced forward presence in Eastern Europe. They've now been joined by another 350 Royal Marines who arrived in Poland today. There to greet them, Prime Minister Boris Johnson. It is a British show of solidarity with its allies in the region, as Russia shows no sign of reducing its military build-up on the border with Ukraine.
We need to work together now to achieve de-escalation, to persuade Vladimir Putin to de-escalate and to disengage. We won't accept, Poland and the UK won't accept a world in which a powerful neighbour can bully or attack their neighbours.
Alongside this show of strength, the diplomatic mission, with the UK's Foreign and Defence Secretaries engaged in talks in Moscow over the next 2 days. The UK's former Chief of the General Staff said despite the continued Russian military build-up, he's confident a diplomatic solution will be found.
I believe this was always a situation where Putin was going to assemble force, he was going to intimidate, he was going to bully, he was going to threaten, and he's actually in a much stronger position like that. If he moves in, the Ukrainians will fight, the body bags will flow back to Russia, and he will be in a Chechnya, Georgia type situation.
More Russian naval forces are continuing their transit towards the Black Sea, despite claims by the French president that he'd secured assurances from Vladimir Putin that there would be no further military escalation, claims rejected by the Kremlin.
For the British government, there is a tricky balance to be struck. Yes, of course, keep up the diplomacy, hence the Foreign and Defence Secretary's visits to Moscow. But they also don't want to be seen to be rewarding Russian aggression. That's why this visit to Poland by the Prime Minister is seen as vital in offering full support to understandably nervous allies in the region.
As Russia continues with what it claims are scheduled military manoeuvres, Ukraine today begins its own large-scale exercises along its eastern border. With so much in the way of rival firepower within sight of each other, the risk of miscalculation is ever present. Mark White, GB News.
Mark Wallace, let's start with you. Your thoughts on all this?
You know, I think it's very hard to see this just as a standalone event. The fact is that what we're seeing now is the result of over 14 years of appeasing Vladimir Putin's Kremlin. You know, in 2008, when Russia invaded Georgia and still occupies a large chunk of that country, I've been to the line of occupation to visit the trenches with Georgian troops and police forces there, looking at part of their own country, still occupied by Russia, nothing was done to support them. Vladimir Putin has already invaded Ukraine. It's 8 years ago, 2014, when Russia invaded
Crimea,
Ukraine.
talking about.
Well, not just Crimea. Remember, Vladimir Putin sponsored, helped to train, arm and propped up the Donbass, the so-called separatists, who incidentally blasted British and other civilians out of the sky on a civilian airliner in Ukrainian airspace. There's been a land war in Europe, in Ukraine's territory, since 2014. So when you see Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, deny any intention, it's worth remembering that in 2014, they denied any intention to invade Ukraine, and then they did it. Since then, they've been denying that they did it, even though their troops are still there. While at home, Vladimir Putin boasts to his people that they've seized parts of Ukraine and incorporated them, hijacked them, annexed them into the territory of Russia. So what we're seeing ultimately is part of the Kremlin's old game, really, which is lying liars and the lies they tell. And you have to see why, which is that they want, just as Mark White said, to try to increase their own clout and to distract, of course, as ever, from growing problems at home.
Marianne?
It's exactly right. It's a policy of destabilising the West as well, I think. It's the kind of the big international chess game where Russia can turn towards China, perhaps, and establish stronger allyship there. And he's testing the mettle of the UK, the US, and the rest of the West, including NATO and its allies, the allies that comprise NATO. Fundamentally, diplomacy and sanctions diplomacy only works if the other person is sort of honestly at the table and is fearful of the reprisals. Putin doesn't want to do that. He doesn't think that we'll follow through. He doesn't think we've got appetite for war, which rightly we don't. But we have to prove that if it comes to it, we will call his bluff. And my concern is that NATO is, to some extent, more getting its ducks in a row. Everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet, a little more than they were perhaps 2 weeks ago. But this is the point where Russia is now escalating the threat to the Ukraine. They're doing military operations with Belarus. They're circling Ukraine. People in Kiev are having to sit down tonight, have conversations with their kids over the dinner table about what happens when the war begins. That is terrifying. And you're right, there's been a land war in Europe up till now. It's just that we've sort of forgotten because it hasn't been relevant enough to us. Of course it is. Russia are a major threat to democracy.
It's true that you can't understand this situation without looking back a little bit in history. And I think what, so far, both of you seem to be ignoring is that NATO undertook not to expand in that part of Europe. And it has. And it's doing everything it can to expand. And obviously, Putin's got wound up about that. And we've had probably 5-6 years, I think, of stories about, whoa, look at the number of troops that Putin's got on the border. When you go and investigate those stories, certainly in the past, those troops were in barracks miles and miles from the border. They weren't doing anything that could be interpreted as hostile action.
They're not doing that now, though.
And they're occupying parts of Ukraine and Georgia. They've been shipped into Kazakhstan to shoot protesters in the streets in order to prop up another of Vladimir Putin's allies. They're deployed in Armenia after Russia waited while Armenia was in such a sufficiently weak position in its war against Azerbaijan about 18 months ago to have to rely on Kremlin security guarantees, which happen to come with yet more territorial military placements. But on that point about NATO expansion, I think you're right, this does get to the nub of what the Kremlin claims its issue is. But ultimately, when the Kremlin says, well, NATO should not expand to, for example, Eastern Europe, to Poland or the Baltics or Hungary or Czechia or potentially, say, Ukraine or Georgia, what's it saying? It says that Russia should have a veto over the foreign security policy of its neighbours. And I think the problem is Russia needs to learn that it has not, once upon a time it conquered these countries. It occupied them with hostile troops and kept them under its heel for decades as part of the Soviet Union. They're not its slaves anymore. It doesn't own these countries, and they have a right to their own foreign policy. If you join a defensive alliance, why is that a threat to a peace-loving Russia?
I think fundamentally, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Gareth, come back now.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be an apologist for Putin. I mean, he's a belligerent kind of guy. But I think this does not make sense if we try and understand it as suddenly a big threat, the threat of World War III, as you described it in your intro, Michelle. Trying to understand it that way just does not make sense. Sure, war could come about, because if we keep this stance towards Russia, if we keep having Western leaders going out and meeting with other powers in the region and stoking up the rhetoric, then, yeah, we may well find that all our worst fears about Putin will come true. But I think if you look at what Putin has done aggressively in the region, it tracks, over the last few years, it tracks quite well NATO's attempts to expand. I would say that we've got very short memories about threats about the most serious crisis in Europe, very short memories about people having weapons that could reach Europe within 45 minutes. Do we remember all of those?
Whilst you're talking, by the way, Gareth, I'm just going to put, whilst you're talking, just going to put a map, actually, of NATO, just if anyone's listening, kind of wondering what we're talking about here, just so you can actually see the shaded areas there, by the way, are obviously NATO. Just, sorry, carry on, Gareth, but I just wanted to give some context to what you're saying on the screen.
I think it's really easy to make a case that dangerous, troublesome things are happening in parts of the world that could threaten our security. The reality is Biden, although he's a Democrat, has always been a hawk. He was very aggressive about what should happen in the Middle East. He's just withdrawn.
He's just withdrawn from Afghanistan.
Exactly. He's withdrawn from Afghanistan in that situation that was going nowhere. It feels to me like with his popularity sliding at home, he's doing what leaders have done through the ages, which is to start a nice conflict elsewhere in Europe to detract from the problems he's having at home. And I think the Afghanistan withdrawal is easily seen as part of that.
I think the Afghanistan withdrawal is shameful, but I think the idea that Biden might be fanning the flames in Europe in order to distract from his issues or to have a nice conflict, I mean, there's nothing that will be nice about Russia invading Ukraine, because the Ukrainians will fight and die. The Russians will fight and die. And the thing that we mustn't forget, I think, Michelle, is that obviously the thing that feels most visceral is the physical theatre of war. These images of soldiers with guns and tanks in the snow. It feels like the Cold War. It feels like the Second World War. The other thing we need to remember is that Russia have many other avenues of waging war with democracy and with the West. That's cyber attacks. They hold a lot of the cards in terms of the global energy security. They can turn the tap off for gas to Ukraine overnight and people will freeze in their homes. And we can't ignore the fact that they have incredible strength to hijack our democracy in ways that aren't as immediate as a tank on the border. I mean, they did the same Brexit. They've done the same with our party, with our
Hang on,
democratic
what do you mean they did
elections.
the same with Brexit?
Well, they funded campaigns that affected the way that the British public, our free-minded citizens, voted in ways that were not illegal.
Absolutely no evidence of that. That's completely debunked. But it does sit nicely as an example of this continually talking up the Russian bear threat to distract from other issues.
But the Russian bear threat, I mean, you said earlier the idea that this is kind of a paper tiger or a paper bear, the Russian threat. This is, after all, the thug state which deployed a radioactive poison on the streets of London. This is the state that deployed Novichok on the streets of Salisbury. I mentioned earlier the British and other civilians blowing out the sky over Ukraine. It ought to concern us, I think, when a country like Ukraine, for the supposed sin in the Kremlin's eyes of wanting to have an independent policy of its own which doesn't simply do what the Kremlin wants, should be subject to invasion, occupation and further threat. If it does not concern us about the plight of the Ukrainians, it certainly should concern us that if you keep appeasing a state like this, eventually ends up on your doorstep.
This word appeasement, references to the Second World War, it all seems to be going in a certain direction. I don't deny that the situation is extremely tense and could go into conflict seemingly at any moment. I don't deny that. I'm just saying we need to look very carefully at where the responsibility lies. And even the Ukrainian president, just the other day, issued a statement to Washington to dial down the rhetoric. So if anyone is trying to talk up the possibility of war, I happen to think it's not Putin in this situation.
It's 100,000 Russian troops, it's air assault brigades being moved to Belarus, it's the Russian Navy steaming around the Crimea. Those are real things, they're not rhetoric.
But what Gareth's saying is that he's been almost, forgive me if I'm paraphrasing you incorrectly, but as I'm interpreting what you're saying, he's almost doing that in response, as opposed to
I'm sorry, but he is. I mean, the interesting question is, let's take this hypothetically. If he's doing this in response to the menacing prospect of his neighbours joining a purely defensive alliance, when Russia opposed the Baltic states joining NATO, when it opposed Hungary or Poland joining NATO, if we'd listened then and we allowed Russia to carry out a veto on the foreign and domestic and international and defence policies of Eastern European countries, do we really think that Putin would be sitting at home saying, all right, lads, put your feet up, we're not going to go on any foreign adventures? Do we really think that? What happened in Georgia or Ukraine was not provocation. This is the reason why his neighbours want to join a defensive alliance is he's an aggressive tyrant.
So what will happen if we continue to stoke up these tensions with Putin? He is going to move further towards China. So that potentially makes the whole situation just a lot more worse, doesn't it? There's no way that in bringing on a conflict with Putin makes this situation better.
This is about deterring a conflict.
Yeah, this is a conversation that was had in 2008 when Georgia fell. This was a conversation that was had again in 2014 when Crimea and the Donbass fell. And nothing happened, nothing changed. Russia did not sit back on its heels. They continued to intimidate and threaten, to undermine democracy and their neighbours. And as you say, Mark, I think you're absolutely right. NATO is a defensive alliance. The only reason you wouldn't want the Ukraine to join is because you know that if you then invade Ukraine, you have all of NATO at your gate with their guns armed and ready.
Final word to you on this, Gareth.
NATO is clearly a threat to Putin. If NATO seeks to increase its dominance in the region against what it promised to do, Putin is bound to get belligerent, and that will push him towards China.
Well, there you go. Lots of differing opinions, lots of opinions as well coming through on the emails. Mark says, well, we wouldn't have to worry about COVID or gas prices if we went to war with Russia. That would be the least of our worries. Trevor says, well, had Trump still been in the White House, neither Russia nor China, no, basically, I think what Trevor's point is, none of this would be going on if you had Donald Trump at the helm. What do you think to that one? And Ian says, when it comes to who is warmongering here, it is the media. There you go, that's Ian's view. Keep your thoughts coming in. I was going to touch on John Major, actually, before the break, but I was quite enjoying that conversation, so I'll talk about John Major in just a second. And I also want to talk about the changes to the masks. You know, the mask mandates in Scotland. If you watch the show regularly, you will know that I think they are appalling. Well, good news there, because apparently they will soon be coming to an end. We'll have that and more in just a few minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, on until 7. My panel, just as a reminder for those of you listening, we've got Mark Wallace, who's the Chief Executive of Conservative Home, Gareth Sturdy, who's a teacher and education consultant, and anthropologist Marianne Hotter. I can tell you, we carried on our conversation right through the break about what is happening in Ukraine. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Former Prime Minister Sir John Major says Boris Johnson and his officials broke lockdown laws over parties held in Downing Street. He accused the government of feeling it need not obey the rules, adding outright lies breed contempt. After all, Sir John Major, of course, always told the truth.
Reputation overseas has fallen because of our conduct. We are weakening our influence in the world. We should be wary. Even a casual glance at overseas comment shows our reputation is being shredded. A nation that loses friends and allies becomes a weaker nation.
I try really hard to be interested and engaged when I have these various interventions, but I struggle. Mark Wallace, when you hear these kind of interventions, because we get them left, right and centre, don't we, from all of these former Prime Ministers, it almost makes me roll my eyes, and I'm sure I shouldn't. But what's your thoughts?
Well, I've spent many years rolling my eyes at the interventions of John Major in particular. I think my first reaction is it's not surprising. You know, the fact is that for years and years now, he's been furious at the prospect of an EU referendum, of it not going his way, of the government then perhaps actually honouring the outcome of it, of leaving the EU, and so on. So it's not a great surprise to hear him attacking the government. Frankly, I think it's a bit rich for him to talk about the reputation of politics after the damage that his government saw to the reputation, certainly of the Conservative Party. I think it's a bit rich to hear him attacking, arguing that this does damage to democracy. Frankly, after signing the Maastricht Treaty, that led to a huge amount of frustration that we're still dealing with decades later about the alienation of proper democratic power. But I confess I'm also annoyed that some of the things that happened in Downing Street or elsewhere in government relating to these party allegations have handed ammunition to a critic like John Major. It frustrates me. I think a lot of Tory members, a lot of Tory voters are also very frustrated to see the government do, frankly, such stupid things that hand ammunition to its critics.
Yeah, lots of own goals. Marianne?
I don't think you should be frustrated that they've handed ammunition to the opposition. You should be frustrated that they're liars and that they're taking the public for absolute fools.
I didn't say that I wasn't frustrated by that. I'm talking about my reaction to John Major.
And I think the thing that frustrates me about this story is that, very cleverly, we've made it a focus about John Major, and we can argue the pros and cons of him as an individual, as a politician, about what happened a long time ago. Earlier, Michelle, there was someone on here on the channel commentating who wasn't alive at the time that John Major was Prime Minister. I mean, that's how far back we have to go, and another thing, he did this. The focus really, really does need to be on whether our Prime Minister is a liar, which he is.
And you're telling me that the focus is not on that. It is relentless.
It
you
should
cannot
be.
open a
He's
newspaper.
the leader of our country, and he's lied. And the thing that I realised today, which I kind of thought, we need to talk about this, he keeps defaulting to say the police are investigating this, and that's very right and proper, and we should wait for the police investigation. I'm sorry, the police have better things to do than investigate whether he was at a party that he knows he was at, because there's photographic evidence, because Sue Gray knows there are, because it's already reached a threshold for the police to be investigating it, which determines that it was flagrant and serious.
But they are involved now, so we should wait till the end of the outcome.
No, he should just say, hands up, I was very wrong, I've lied in Parliament about it, I'm off. I'm sorry, everyone, for the damage that I've caused. I wish the Conservative Party and you good people of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland the best. I'm going to step away because the longer I stay, the more damage I do. And I think the one thing that John Major is absolutely spot on is it is impacting our credibility abroad, and it's massively eroding trust in politicians, which was already pretty rock bottom here in our country.
But
it's disgusting behaviour. He needs to go.
This is Major's shtick all the time, isn't it? Boris is a sham. He's a moral outrage. And he's making the country look a sham and an outrage. And you know where he's always going with that, and that's because of Brexit.
No, it's because it's true.
He's always doing that. Who cares what Captain Underpants thinks? He's a has-been. I wrote down what he just said. Our democracy is a fragile structure, and Major, in the Brexit referendum, did absolutely everything possible to turn over that result. The majority of people in this country who voted for Brexit will have listened to him saying, democracy is a fragile structure and we need to protect it, and think that's a hypocrisy as equal, if not greater, to Boris having a party. It's
utterly nonsense.
Far more important.
It's an absolute red herring to focus on John Major and his track record. The focus needs to be resolutely, and I'm not apologising for this, the focus needs to be on the fact that our Prime Minister has lied to his people and lied to Parliament.
Well, there you go. I think if there's much more focus on it, I run the risk of dying of boredom. So I am going to move on, if it's OK with you. I want to talk about something that I think is a very important topic. Schools, in particular masks in schools. Many of you may recall last month schools in England were told to end their mask-wearing policy. Yet some schools still insist on having these policies in their schools. One, in particular, that came across my desk just this week, actually, was writing to the parents of pupils whose children dared to go into the school without their mask. The Lord Grey Academy in Milton Keynes busily writing letters to the parents and guardians of its students, pointing out the repeat attempts to try and get pupils to wear these masks. We have tried to get in touch with this school. And I am picking on this school in particular because it came across my desk, but there are many, many, many more schools in England that are doing this. I tried repeatedly to get hold of this school just to ask for clarification as to what is actually driving their policy. In particular, what science was this policy based on, given that actually the government has removed this mandate? Got to say, struggled to get an answer. So if you are watching anyone from that school, or any school, quite frankly, that's doing this, do get in touch and let me know, of course, what science you are basing this on. But Gareth, the reason that I bring this up today specifically is because Scotland, we will all be aware, they've had mask mandates for secondary school children, 11 upwards, since September 2020. They're only now just talking about revoking those or removing that for the classrooms, but still within the communal areas. Now, I have to say, I think that these mask mandates, forcing children to wear masks for hours and hours on end, I can't help it. I think it is akin to child abuse. What? Your thoughts? I do.
Child abuse?
Yes, child abuse. I'm furious about it. But let me get Gareth's thoughts, because you are indeed a teacher and an education specialist. Your thoughts?
I think children are robust and resilient, and I wouldn't use child abuse to describe this. I think that children can handle having masks on. But what I think is really important is, just as we're seeing with the COVID restrictions, the impact they've had on the economy, and how all of those results are now starting to come in, we're going to see the same with education. And I think masks are fundamentally anti-education. I think they're really, really bad for education. And schools don't need to, or schools in England certainly don't need to have them. Schools in Scotland don't either now. The Scottish track record in education has been really bad for years, and there is no way that masking pupils up is going to do anything to make that better. It's actually going to make it a lot worse. So Scotland should get rid of the mask. There should be no schools in any part of the UK that is insisting its pupils wear masks. And parents of children in those schools should be onto the heads, telling them that they're just not going to comply with this anymore because it's against the educational interests of the pupils.
Indeed. So, yeah, Marianne, just to reiterate, my personal view on all of this is I think that forcing children to wear masks for, 7 hours a day plus commuting time, I think it's akin to child abuse, in my personal opinion.
Why is that, though?
Because I think
what is so bad about wearing a mask?
Have you ever worn them for 7, 8 hours a day continuously, day in, day out, day in, day out? Well, as a child, you're there to firstly learn. It's widely accepted. In fact, it was in a government report that the English government produced that was saying that actually learning is deeply affected when you're concealing your face. If I'm concealing my face and trying to teach you, it's not effective. If you are a child that, for example, has got hearing difficulties, that learns by looking, reading your face, your lips, it is nigh on impossible to learn in that way. That community has just been completely overlooked in all of this. The socialisation, the interactions that children have with one another, again, when you mask a portion of your face, you cannot interact in that way. It absolutely affects mental health. There's been studies that have come out that show that mental health in children is massively damaged by lots of these restrictions. The development of children, when you look at their communication, learning, reading, speaking, it is impacted by this stuff. I do not think it's necessary scientifically. I think it's pathetic. I think it's wrong. I absolutely would not allow my child to go to school if he was at that age in a mask. Full stop. That's why I think it's akin to child abuse.
I think what you need to do is have those concerns, which many are very valid, weighed against the potential of harm if, for example, all those children come down with COVID, if the teacher or the teaching staff come down with COVID and then can't be at school at all. Because then what you're comparing is learning that is to some extent compromised versus no learning at all. And obviously we are in, the whole thing about this pandemic is that it's a dynamic situation where you have to constantly reappraise the risks and benefits of any given course of action. And so when people come out and say, well, this is terrible because look at where we are now and that there were these protocols or procedures or rules that were in place, we have to compare like for like. So now that we're in an epidemic of Omicron variant rather than Delta or Alpha, now that we have much better understanding of how this virus acts, how we can protect ourselves against it, how we can treat people who are ill because of it, then rightly we change the ways that we attempt to protect public health. We change the way that we're trying to prevent spread of infection. So it's right that that mask mandate is now being revised, looked at, perhaps withdrawn, but that's not to say that it wasn't appropriate before.
I don't
yes,
think it was
there's been harm,
before.
but there's harm because 150 million people have died. 150,000 people in the UK have died from COVID, and many more have got long COVID.
But the scientific evidence for masks is marginal at best. All the meta-analyses that have been done have shown very, very small differences, if any, and that depends on what sort of mask you're wearing. That's with surgical masks and all that kind of stuff. But why are we leaving out the educational impact? Sure, children wearing masks may have some small effect on transmission. It is a dynamic situation. We're not in a situation where that is now dangerous for the vast majority of the population, but it is extremely dangerous for education. You cannot learn properly with a mask on. You just can't.
And that's right. So change it now. But we can't, condemn the past.
Sure. I think that point about a dynamic policy is really important. The fact is that if there was less clarity or less knowledge when less data available when, say, masking was introduced, if it was one of those measures, which it was, which helped schools to reopen, schools being, my eldest son was in his first year of primary school when schools closed and suddenly you've got 35-year-olds all on a Google Classroom with someone asking them to mute. It's going to take quite a while to get stuff to happen. That was being able to opening schools' door was an improvement. Now, of course, these policies should go. I cannot agree that they're akin to child abuse. I think frankly, child abuse was a. In that case, I choose to vocally disagree.
That's all right.
Because I think that's a much more horrendous set of circumstances. I think it's important we draw a distinction between the two. But, yesterday I was at my son's primary school. for the year 1, year 2 show, and the head teacher stood up and said, I see some people in the audience are wearing masks. You can do that if you choose, but there's actually no requirement for you to do that. And you know what? It felt like another step on the road back to normality.
Well, I have to say, lots of divided opinion coming in on this. Irene says, yes, Michelle, you're right. It is child abuse to force children to wear masks. It's cruel to expect them to wear them for 7 to 8 hours. Linda says, Michelle is talking about child abuse, wearing masks. What on earth? Get her off the air. There you go. That's Linda's view. I have to say, I stand by my perspective. I don't mind if you disagree with me. That's how life should be. We should be able to have different opinions that agree to disagree. If more people could do that, if you ask me, the world would be in a better place. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got lots more to come, so don't go away.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Must be.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. I'm Michelle Dewberry. Just a reminder, very briefly, of my panel. We've got Mark Wallace, who's the Chief Executive of Conservative Home, Gareth Sturdy, who's a teacher and education consultant, and anthropologist Mary-Anne O'Hotter. I've got to say, we just spent our break continuing the mask conversation. No one on my panel agrees with me, but hey, guess what? I can deal with that, it's not a problem. And lots of thoughts coming in. Again, very split kind of outlooks on this whole mask situation. Do keep your thoughts coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at gbnews. Now, let's move on, shall we, and talk about fracking. Boris Johnson has been urged by a cabinet minister to return to fracking amid concern among Tory MPs over plans to move to net zero. The Prime Minister yesterday told his cabinet that oil and gas will continue to play an important part in UK energy supply as the country transitions to green energy. Brexit Opportunities Minister, I mean, I don't know why it makes me laugh, that title, it shouldn't, but anyway, Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg suggested that there should be a return to fracking to increase Britain's energy independence. However, the suggestion was rejected by the Prime Minister, and today as well, it was announced that the fracking firm Cordrilla is to permanently abandon UK shale gas sites. Fracking, of course, to many, would be seen as a controversial method of extracting shale gas, and it was banned in 2019 amid concerns that it was causing earthquakes. Right, actually, Mark, I'll start with you for no reason other than you are sitting, looking at me?
Massively in your eye line.
Yes, you're there, you're there.
Sizable and obstructive to the light. Yeah, so I agree with Jacob Rees-Mogg about this. The fact is that we were just talking earlier about the importance of things like energy security. And the fact is that if we are reliant, for example, on gas being piped from Russia or oil and gas being imported from Saudi Arabia, then we are at the mercy of some rather unpleasant people whose interests will quite often not align with our own. It's not a very good idea. Secondly, on environmental grounds, where do we think the gas that's having to be shipped in on giant tankers from the United States in order to fuel Europe through this self-imposed, self-inflicted kind of energy shortage in the winter, how do we think that's getting out of the ground? You know, we are using fracking already. We're just turning a blind eye to what happens elsewhere. That means the jobs and so on that come with it, by the way, are happening in Pennsylvania and other parts of the United States.
But what about the risks, though, that people might say, whether it's contamination of water supply, whether it's earthquakes?
Well, I think, firstly, this country has very strict regulations on all sorts of different industries. You know, it's important to look at you can set the regulations appropriate to the type of geology you've got. You know, the fact is, if you're accessing, say, some of the shale gas, I'm not a geologist, but as I understand it, some shale gas reserves in the United States are an awful lot less deep, for example, an awful lot more accessible to other porous layers in the earth than those in the United Kingdom. It's also the case that if you want to move to a greener energy system, if you were to switch, for example, from coal to gas, to shale gas, that automatically represents an environmental improvement. It's not a binary...
Does it?
Yes, it does. You burn shale gas instead of burning coal, you will see you're dramatically improving
We should definitely not be burning coal, but we should also not be taking shale gas out of the ground.
We are burning coal after we decided, it's worse in some other countries like Germany where they turned away from nuclear power after a tsunami in Japan. But we have seen more reliance and more use of coal as a result of some of these policies. I think if you want to have, for example, solar power and wind power, which you ought to have and you ought to transition towards, you need things like baseload supply. When the wind doesn't blow, when the sun doesn't shine, and until you get the right battery technology, you need other forms of power to pick up the energy that you can turn on and off, like gas.
Marianne, if you say you shouldn't take coal out the ground, you shouldn't be burning gas, then what you are saying, as we can see, is that everybody across the land should be paying about £700 more, possibly even more than that, for their fuel. You're saying that pensioners must go into fuel poverty. There is no way of satisfying the energy demand in any other way than using gas. And to sort of artificially restrict the flow of gas, push the energy prices sky high, and then say, we must now close the small shale gas reserves we've got is utterly insane.
This is so silly. You cannot conflate the cost of energy crisis that we are currently in at the moment, which is hand in hand with a much wider cost of living crisis, which has so many different components, to the fact that shale gas extraction was banned in 2019, quite rightly, because the UK does have a very strong regulatory framework around this area. And they went, that's not safe and it's not good for the people of Britain. It's not a safe technology
why isn't it safe?
to do. Because
fracking...
it causes earthquakes, because it contaminates groundwater.
So earthquakes, if fracking causes earthquakes, how many more earthquakes do you think hydroelectric dams create? Anything that goes...
No, they do.
The thing is, here's the thing. Investing in shale gas technology withdraws money that could otherwise be invested in accelerating green renewable technology, which does increase our energy sovereignty.
It stops pensioners burning gas.
No, it's like being worried about the car exhaust emissions and then going, oh, hang on a minute, then we need to invest in horses and carts.
Well, that's what happened
when you banned. That's what happened when you banned shale gas. Was you said, actually, we're going to ban these cars, and we're now going to use the equivalent horse carts, bicycles, and so on.
Go forwards towards green energy, towards progressive technology
and you ought to transition towards that.
Does provide jobs, that does provide investment, that does support a levelling up agenda. It's just the most backward
this
thing
is not
to
a
say.
binary
What we
thing.
need to
You
go
need a
is
mix.
backwards to dirty technology that harms the
nuclear,
environment
then?
and harms people.
Nuclear would be by far the best solution to this.
I'm a fan of nuclear.
Great.
Yeah.
We've found something we can agree on energy policy.
Yeah.
We should have
Not shale gas.
We should have been dealing with this problem years and years and years ago. Every single administration just kicks the energy problem down the road. They don't want to invest in the big, bold, brave infrastructure projects of building big power stations, big reactors. The idea that we are going to use windmills and solar panels to provide people with energy in winter is already in front of our very eyes falling apart, and yet people still say, no, the problem is nothing to do with the fact that we've completely degraded our ability to provide gas in this country and have to ship it in now from other places. It's nothing to do with that at all. I just don't understand that logic.
The wind blows in winter. The challenge is to accelerate that technology so that we can harness that energy when the wind blows, when the sun shines, when the waves
I'm afraid
crash
that's wrong.
against the shore.
We've just come to the end of an extended period where there was no wind. In terms of energy production, there wasn't enough wind to drive the turbines. We had a complete lull. The turbines don't function. We've already got an energy crisis because people can't burn gas because they can't afford it. And there is no solution to that problem. I mean, if there was a solution, I'd be interested to hear it. But there is no solution to the fact that pensioners are going to have to pay exorbitant costs just to keep warm.
I must say, one of the things I think where you're right, successive governments have dodged, of all parties, have dodged this question of how we provide new, better, affordable, reliable, large-scale energy generation, and that's what's led us across all sorts of different topics, not just shale gas, including some, for example, wind farm developments, which a lot of politicians simply haven't wanted to confront the controversy of actually building something somewhere. One of the things we should do on energy, lined up with the question about the cost of living crisis, is something you see done in France from time to time, which is that if there's a new wind farm or a new shale pad or a new nuclear power station, I'd frankly rather see all three as part of our energy mix, if it's built near you, you should get free energy. Your house should come with free energy or a free portion of your energy bill for a certain period of time as part of the externality, part of the downside of having a development near you, if you feel there is a downside. That should be something which is a perk for that development. When you look at, say, parts of Cumbria where you have the nuclear power station, you see very, very, very strong popular support for that technology and that infrastructure because the jobs are already there. Part of the political difficulty now is creating new capacity often runs up against no campaigns from every single direction. I think it's important that government should start thinking about, instead of just telling people, actually, we're not going to make a decision, stop being awkward, until you stop being awkward, they should come up with a way to give people an incentive.
Physics is your subject, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely is.
I think one of the things that we actually need to do is educate the public about what the basis of all these different technologies are, so that when people have that knee-jerk reaction, nuclear, bad, dangerous, scary, oh, it's like Chernobyl, we go, hang on a minute, no, it's not like that. These are the alternatives. This is what this technology looks like. And actually engage people in being part of building a future that we can be proud of, that our children can live in a cleaner, healthier, better world.
Well, there you go. You heard it all then. Lots of you writing in, split on most of the topics, but when it comes to fracking, I've got to say pretty much, well, certainly the majority want it bringing back. I was going to talk to you, by the way, before I finished about car theft, but I've run out of time. So I might talk about that tomorrow. But if you've got a Ford Focus, yours is the car most likely to be stolen. There you go. Anyway, that's all we've got for tonight. Thank you very much to my panel, and thank you to you at home for your thoughts. I'll be back tomorrow 6 till 7. Have a great evening in the meantime.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGibbon. Clear and frosty overnight for most of us, but if you can bear the chill, first thing Friday, a sunny sunrise to look forward to, and then a fine Friday for the vast majority. We've seen low pressure bring strong winds and showers to the northern half of the UK during Thursday. That's now moving into the North Sea, but still, tides or isobars along the North Sea coast will lead to blustery conditions for the North Sea coast overnight. Perhaps even some local gales in exposed locations. But away from that, clear skies for the vast majority, some cloud and showers continuing in western parts, but otherwise under clear skies with light winds, temperatures dipping to 0 to -3 in many places, as low as -5 to -10 for some sheltered parts of snow-covered Scotland. Into the start of Friday then, beautiful sunny skies first thing, and despite the chill, well, temperatures will be rising through the morning, and actually eastern parts of England keep the sunshine well into the afternoon. Cloudier skies turning up elsewhere, 1 or 2 showers for northern England, southern Scotland, and temperatures rising to 7 to 9 Celsius up and down the country. Then a change on the way for Friday evening. Wet and windy weather pushes into Northern Ireland and much of Scotland. Hill snow for a time for central Scotland before milder air sweeps in. Also some flakes of snow over the Pennines, Northern England, West Wales seeing the wet weather turn up by the early hours of Saturday. With the cloud advancing and with the wind picking up, most places are frost-free as we start off the weekend, but 0 degrees possible in East Anglia and the southeast. Then for Saturday, a 3-way split. Showers for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Blustery conditions here. Wet and windy for Northern England. Much of Wales with some heavy rain, especially over the higher ground. Drier to the south and southeast before it turns wet and windy here during Sunday. But as the wind and rain sweeps through, it also turns milder.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud. Belly